I'm gonna get a hair off your chest just because we're
Thanks.
friends and that's what friends do.
Yeah.
So
Friends don't let friends have hair on them.
yeah.
Oh.
Or like earlier today when my fly was unzipped and somebody knew and didn't tell me.
It would have come out at some point, but she was getting ready. I thought maybe you were
What was gonna come out? Welcome to the very first episode of Under the Sun podcast with Emily Johnson, NTP.
And I, Leah Colgan. Amazing songwriter.
I do all the things. You'll find that out.
Yes.
We're both kind of jack of all trades. So this is the very first episode. So we're just going to talk about kind of like who we are, what the podcast is going to be like, what to expect, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Let's go back to we'll go to the beginning of Emily Johnson, like how she became an NTP, what brought you here, all that stuff. And how like, maybe kind of segue like into like how we met and how like why we're here together.
For sure. Yeah. Which I feel like it's just, I don't know, it's a super fun story, but just crazy how like we grew up very similar in so many ways. And then we married men who are best friends, who've been best friends since like 6th grade, maybe. I don't know, maybe.
Really early.
And they're very, very similar. And then we're incredibly similar. So it's just cool how that all worked out. So but I'm sure pieces of my story that I'm not going to share will come out through different podcasts also. But just growing up, I grew up in a pretty, what I would say, consider conservative Christian family, homeschooled until 8th grade when I went to high school at a local Christian school because I wanted to swim competitively and they had a swim team. But otherwise I was homeschooled up until that point. Probably my earliest memory of like really being sick. I mean, I grew up in a big family. There were 4 of us. There were actually 5 of us. My older sister had passed away from a brain tumor before we were born. But we were always a really close family growing up, all about 2 years apart, all homeschooled. So again, just really, really close. But now looking back, it's interesting because I feel like we all had some health issues growing up, but it really was like somewhere between 10 and 12 where I started really, really getting sick. You know, kind of go through that puberty stage where I started my cycle and all that fun stuff. I got mono. I had already a history of asthma and allergies and all that kind of stuff. And then had mono, got super depressed, actually tried to commit suicide somewhere between 10 and 12. That stage is a little fuzzy. Also had a bout of like severe anorexia during that time where I was like just super afraid to eat anything because I thought I was fat. I don't know if every child goes through that, but I feel like a lot of, young girls kind of have some issues with food. I grew up with a mom who, she did a lot of different diets. So I don't know if maybe in my mind too.
It's all a fad. It's like you hear it from a young age. I remember my mom being like, I'm starting a new diet. And it's just like, oh, that's just life. Like that's what you do, right? You just diet. It's like, no. Yeah. So I don't know if like there was that. I don't know. So interesting. It's just kind of part of that story also. But then just like dealt with depression. Like that was part of my story. It's just dealing with depression for a really, really long time. And then again, I got really bad in high school, but then like just had all these weird things growing up of, you name it, and it seemed like I had it, right? Like endometriosis, crazy acne, crazy migraines where I would get sick from them, allergies to a lot of different things, skin issues, sensitivities to things, terrible stomach aches, really bad teeth. I had a lot of even trauma with a fall that I had where it was like a lot of severe. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was little. I was running up the stairs. My mom had a phone call, back when we had like corded phones.
Oh, yeah.
So you couldn't take the phone to mom. But running down the stairs, we were going to go swimming at a friend's house. And so I was running up the stairs in flip-flops and to tell the person that mom was coming. And I tripped on a stair and fell. And the top part of my teeth, they didn't break off. They actually went up inside my gum. I was maybe 6 or something at that point. So had some trauma there. I've had crazy amount of stitches. I always seem to be cutting myself with things or like falling into things. Several broken bones, multiple casts. I don't know if you've ever had a cast,
Never had a cast.
I've had lots of broken bones where I had to have casts. So just like odd things, trauma, illness, endometriosis, issues with cycles, periods were all messed up. I started swimming competitively when I was like 7th going into 8th grade. And that was huge in helping my depression. At that point, I think it had lifted some, but not significantly. So moving into that junior high school age, which is just already, there's just trauma, right? And stress and friends, and it's just kind of weird. In that, like, trying to figure out who you are. And so in that, I got a little more identity maybe through swimming. And I also had never ever really like done a sport or something. So I feel like that also, just in exercise in general, just felt like it helped some of that depression lift. The problem was, I think, that I don't think that the chlorine and the mold, because of where we are in terms of Midwest, every pool I swam at, well, not every pool, but majority of the pools I swam at were all indoor pools. So you have terrible ventilation, which again, now I know on this end, but like my health itself started getting worse as, so the depression lifted, which was amazing. But I did really good in swimming for a while. Like, so found my niche, just loved being competitive. I'm competitive by nature. My older sister and I, my younger sister somewhat too, but like, I feel like growing up with sisters, like we were just very competitive with one another, and we were close in age. So I think it gave me an outlet for that competitiveness that was probably a little more helpful than being competitive with siblings, especially when you're homeschooled and you can't get away from them, or like competitive with like other kids at school or whatever. So for me, being competitive in that nature was super helpful, gave me an outlet. But then, so then I went to start going to school, which was a new thing. Learning how to sit in class when I wasn't used to that maybe, and turning in papers and writing things a certain way and test taking and all that stuff. And so I'd say the first couple years of high school were awesome. But then as I kind of got into that sophomore year, I ended really, really high at our sectional. So it was like, awesome, junior, senior year, I'm going to go to state. We're going to, had gotten a few letters of just interest for colleges to swim collegiately, and I was super excited for that. Hit my junior year, and I didn't do as well. And again, some of my memory here still is a little fuzzy. The Lord is gracious, and I feel like some of my memory from when I was younger has started to come back. But probably that junior high school to senior, up until when I started really working on my health, there's that pretty big window of memory that's still fuzzy. So somewhere between that junior and senior year, I started getting really, really sick, or they didn't know what it was. So backtrack a little bit. Sophomore year of high school, I got a weird skin disease.
What?
Have we we don't know about this either. It's called morphea. Like
Sorry. It took starting a podcast to know that my friend has a skin disease.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, the scarring is all still there. So it started on my back.
I tell you, I think you know somebody.
I mean, talk about antibiotics, right? Like, yeah. Later on now, like on this side, like studying into a little more, I really honestly think it's parasitic in nature because of muscle testing on someone else, and like who I believe also had it. And we kind of talked through that with her. But I think it was kind of in the health world, it was autoimmune. But again, I didn't know anything about that, nor did my parents. So it was a weird skin condition that started on my back and like grew down my leg, and like made my skin super, super hard and tough. So sophomore in high school, and I was a lifeguard, swam competitively. Like, who wants to get in a swimsuit, right? Aww. When you have this like weird purple looking hard white stuff going down your leg. So on like crazy amounts of antibiotics to kill that. And then I started having all these other health issues. And so then we were, I laughed. Sometimes I have a few clients now who will sit and we'll talk, right? And they're like, high school age. And I'm like, let me guess, you have a cardiologist and a dermatologist and a, neurologist and a family practitioner and a gynecologist, because you're in high school. So you have to go, to an OB gynecologist kind of person to like make sure everything's okay. And yeah. So at that point I feel like I had every doctor. We were trying to get into like Mayo Clinic or Iowa City or something because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Luckily, being in that private setting in terms of school, I missed a lot of days, but I feel like they were able to work with me a little bit more maybe than a public school would have. And I'm not really sure. I've never really checked into whether that made sense or not. But it does seem like they were able to have a little more flexibility on that end. But anyway, finally someone was like, I think it's your brain. Well, my sister died of a brain tumor. And my poor mother, oh my word, I can't imagine when it's like, I think we've checked everything else, right? We've checked heart, we've done all this stuff, like we've done tilt table. I mean, they were trying to get me to pass out on tilt table. They were like doing all these crazy tests.
Having seizures and stuff. So that's
well, they didn't know, right? At that point, like, so my seizures, when I was having seizures, seizures, they're partial seizures. So what it would look like, sometimes it would go into like a little bit of convulsing, but initially when they started, it would just like, I would just space out and I would just stare. And like, it was like I watched myself do it and I could like see myself like float. It's weird. It's weird. It's like an out of body experience where like, you know what's happening. And sometimes I would like fall and cry and like shake a little bit, but I wouldn't like pass out, fall, start convulsing like you think seizures are. So they did an EEG and they're like, oh, because eventually, right, they're like, well, I think we have something wrong with her brain. Because at this point, that was like my first out of body experience. Where I was like, I was at school after a final for high school, fell, like, and I was like, I'm laying on the ground.
Induced, right?
Yeah, like laying on the ground. It was Spanish. It was Spanish final. I remember that. Is that weird? Like, it was after my Spanish final and I still had coffee in my throat. Like, what? I don't know. What crazy like junior is like taking coffee to high school? Yeah. I don't know. Especially when I was like sick but it's besides the point. Apparently it was, I couldn't stay awake. That was the other thing is like, I would fall asleep all the time. And again, like I was like, for me, I was super encouraged by how fast I was swimming. And then going into that junior year, like I was swimming 6 days a week, lifting weights 3 or 4 times a week. And I couldn't finish a race. Like I would eventually, but I was fine initially. And there was like my energy would just burn out like crazy. And so again, running all these things while we're doing this, super like allergic to everything in terms of like hives breaking out and all this fun stuff. So we, that very first time after the Spanish final, falling on the ground and like, apparently my friends were all around me and they're like, what's wrong? Are you okay? And I remember telling the doctor, I was like watching myself do it. Like I like fell and like cried and like couldn't like walk, like my leg strength, like, but I'm watching myself do it. And I was like, it's just weird. So he's like, I think that sounds like a seizure. So we do an EEG and they're like, found like, oh, for sure. Well, again, I have an aunt that's epileptic and a grandma who is epileptic, both different sides of the family. So it's just immediately chalked up to genetics because everything else at this point had an explanation. Someone in my family on one side or the other had, even to the point where like, I don't know if you know this, but like when I had the trauma to my teeth, they realized that I also had a weird genetic issue where like I don't have permanent teeth on my eye teeth. What? And so I had to like go through life with either fake teeth or no like front teeth. It was like, I don't know, 7th, 8th grade before I finally got like front teeth. Because yeah.
I didn't know that.
I know. It's just gonna keep, and I'm sure there's more that I'm missing that's just gonna keep on coming out. Wow. So
wait. Then.
Yeah. So let's backtrack.
So you have those aren't
fake
real?
teeth. Yeah. No, they're yeah.
So are they implants?
No.
They come out?
No, it's a bridge.
Okay.
I mean, at that point in like high school, I was like the only people I know who have like a bridge are like grandma. It's like I have to get a bridge, but I mean, and I'm thankful because I think the implants back then we couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
But now what I know now, I'm so grateful that my parents couldn't afford it because that type of material would have potentially been more detrimental.
Yeah.
So for sure. Yeah. So much fun information. So anyway, did an EEG, go on seizure meds, was really great for like 9 months. Felt really, really great. And then what happens, like always seems to happen, is I started breaking out in hives really, really bad, like everywhere. And again, you're a swimmer, you're in the water, you don't have makeup on, you don't and then it was just like all over. And it would always start on my lips And like, it would be like, I look like a little kid who like, the little kids who like, and then their lips are all red and everything. And so then the doctor's like, I think it's the medicine. They took me off the medicine and it cleared up. So, and then, I take massive amount of Benadryl to get rid of the effects of that reaction I was having, which also makes you crazy sleepy. So every time they put me on a new medication, I can't drive for 3 months. And I could be in the water, but they were very like leery. Like they would let me be in the water.
In the water, then you drown. Right. And who would would they catch it in time, or would they think you were just
right? Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely one of those where like it was like I could, depending on where I was at, and depending on how deep it was, and depending on who I was around. But eventually, though, by senior year, I just quit swimming because it was too much. So I think if I remember correctly, I went through like 9 medications in like a year. Some medicines would make me like legit hallucinate. Other medications, I would just get the same reaction where I would just break out in hives. And at no point did my seizures ever really stop. And then every time they do an EEG, the best part is like they put all these little electrodes all over your head. So I would break out with hives from all like the gels. So then I was like, that would be like on my head, and like I had to do a 3-day one time, and I was like this is itching so badly, and then you go through all the trauma of being a senior in high school, and I
then being labeled the sick girl.
Right, and I couldn't go on our senior trip because it was like, in the boonies of like Tennessee, and there wasn't a hospital close, and what if we needed it? So I couldn't do that. So then my depression got really, really bad again. So then by the end of, somewhere in the middle of senior year of high school, like again, tried to commit suicide.
Baby Emily.
I know. But thank you, Jesus. Like, I feel like every time he stopped me in some way or the other, like it was always divine. Like nobody knew I was to that point. But there was physical resistance to be able to ever follow through with what I was trying. Which is cool now. I feel like now I look back and I'm like, oh, the Lord was like, there was like an angel that was like, nope, you're not gonna open that door, or no, you're not gonna follow through with those pills. Like, so that part is just awesome looking back. So one of the awesome things that I was given during high school was I got a full ride to our community college. I applied for a scholarship and I won the scholarship, which was awesome. My struggle was I always, even as a little girl, like I don't remember ever necessarily having dreams of like getting married and having a family, but like I was not necessarily wanted to do like business, but like I always felt like I'm going to do big things, like something amazing, like God's going to do something amazing in my life. And so being sick and then like, okay, I got this full ride to a community college because at that point, unfortunately, I couldn't go swim collegiate. Like I couldn't drive. Like I could barely function. Like how was I supposed to and my family, like with my family situation, like it was like I had to also be able to have a job during it because I had to be able to pay, even with a full ride, you still have to pay for books and food and all that kind of stuff. And so it just did not seem in the possibilities, but I had this full ride. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life because I don't even know what I can do tomorrow, And at that point too, like, I feel like I also had I stopped committing to things because I didn't know how I was going to feel. I also had been dating John, during a lot of high school. So my senior year,
know all this was going on?
Yeah. So my senior year, I dated him. We like a lot of couples in their story, took a break or whatever, because it was like, I'm a senior, I feel terrible and sick, but I'm still a senior and I want to do what I can, and which wasn't a lot, but, and he was in college. So that was do you ask your college boyfriend to come back and go? We didn't, it was Christian school, so we didn't have prom, but we had a spring banquet, which was supposed to be the equivalent of prom. But that was weird. Do you ask him to come back? So anyway, it was just well, I'm going to get better and I'm going to go to college and whatever. And that lasted 3 months. And then I was just kidding. Can we get back together?
Aww. So did you break up with him?
I broke up with him. And then we got back together 3 months later.
Did you call him? Did you say I changed my mind?
Yeah. Aww. And I think so much of it too was for as young as we were. And
so it's not 18, you're 17?
Yeah, what would he have been? He would have been like 18, 19 at that point.
Okay.
But like, even with that, like, I'm amazed now that I look back at like, what guy wants to like hang out with the sick girl, you know? But it was just like, nobody else understood what I was going through, and like so many other people, and I don't blame them at all. But like, they're young, they're healthy. They're not going to wait around and like be at home with me watching movies all the time.
Yeah.
When they could go to parties, and they could go to activities, and they could go do sports, and they can go away to school. Like, it is like, a weird.
But isn't it kind of like God setting a foundation for like, for you and your life? Like, a lot of people think, a lot of high schoolers think like, this is everything. Like, everything that happens in high school is so important. And it is, it's important to a certain extent. Like, I know you feel like trash right now. You don't feel good. But like, the lives that you will impact, the big things that you are doing, like that feeling you had as a little kid to do something big, like you're taking those steps now, like
absolutely
big and
because
you're on the other side a little, like
for sure,
and it'll help your needs.
Well, and I think what I've realized again on this side of heaven, I don't think he owes us anything. He doesn't owe us an explanation. But what I've been so amazed at, like how he has shown me, is how he doesn't waste anything if you give it to him, right? Like, put your yes on the table, allow him to walk you through what he needs to walk you through. And I mean, my dad's testimony alone, like I should have known this, right, from being little, but like my dad's testimony is exactly that. Like, he lost he had so many things throughout his journey. And my mom, I mean, she's part of that too, but like it led him, to minister to homeless men, like, and nothing was wasted. Like, no part of his journey was wasted. And I feel like the same redemption in so much of my story is like, nothing is wasted. Like, everything that has been so hard. And I think at one point too, I was like, God, why? Like I remember being in high school and being like, am I Job? Like, you're just taking everything away. Is this just, or am I Paul? Is this just the thorn in my side that I just have to deal with the rest of my life? Like, I was going to counseling. I was getting prayer at church. I was digging into my Bible. I was doing what the Christian thing to do, but I wasn't getting better. Like, I wasn't getting healed. Like,
We interrupt this podcast to talk today about a very, very special sponsor. Since we're not actually all that popular yet, we are sponsoring ourselves. So we would like to talk about Emily Johnson and how she sells King Coffee. Tell us a little bit about King Coffee.
So my favorite thing about King Coffee is sometimes it's really tough to always remember our supplements, but King Coffee is going to be a mixture of really great, awesome therapeutic dose of reishi mushroom spores, along with some really good, high quality coffee. So you get a lot of the benefits of coffee without some of the negative effects. It is good
Delicious.
At modulating your immune system. It's good at just busting biofilms. It's just super supportive. It is kind of the king of all mushrooms. And at the same time, when we forget our supplements, most of us don't forget our coffee.
It's delicious. So go to Emily's Instagram at gracious.healing and order some King Coffee today. It is fan-freaking-tastic.
And then again, I understand even through that, like, I was also picking up a lot of emotional baggage throughout that process because...
And labels, probably.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, when you're trying to figure out who you are, and I think most of us at that junior high, high school, and going into college, right, we're trying to figure out who we are. And then when you feel like it's just easier not to fight it, like, I will just be labeled this. That's okay. That's who I am. Like, that just must be who I am. And so I was klutzy. I was ditzy. I couldn't go a year without going to the ER. It had been like a decade, I feel like, of at least once a year, Emily's going to go to the ER. And one year it was just to have a baby. I had to go through the ER to like get, because I had gone into labor. But still, that was my year. Like, that was my one thing that year. But like, I still seemed like probably 10 years, at least 10 years, if not more, of like constant ER visits. And again, just weird, bizarre things sometimes. So going into college, super excited, but don't know what I'm supposed to do, So it's really, again, you're saying like part of our story. I originally went in, I don't know if I knows this part of the story. But like went in, my original degree was psychology. And then I changed it to nursing until I realized I was petrified of needles. Like, there's just no way. Yeah. Like, no way I could do a needle. And then I went into early childhood education. And then eventually was just so sick and like couldn't keep up with anything that I eventually, because part of the scholarship too was volunteering at events. Like you had to do so many hours of volunteer service. And I had to get rides to school every day. I could barely stay awake in class. Like I could barely pass things. I did as much online as I could. The beauty of being homeschooled is I knew how to study at home when I was sick. And I still had to work a part-time job. And then I was like, I don't have energy to like also keep up with my requirements for the scholarship in order to have certain grades and then have certain volunteer hours. And they had to be at the school. And so that was
little baby Emily, because like all the doctors were just saying, oh, it's genetics. So
yeah.
You know, good luck with the rest of your life and your scholarship.
For sure.
I mean, you're thinking like, there's something wrong with me. I have no energy like everybody else, which then...
Yeah, I had one neurologist constantly, it's just stress. Well, no, duh, it's stress. Are you kidding me? Like, what high schooler is not going to be stressed with the fact that like, my skin is terrible. My hair was falling out. I had such bad hair. I can't...
never know because you have such fantastic...
Thank you. But like, my sister knows. She does my hair, right? And she's like... She would be like cutting it. She's like, we just need to cut it off. Like, it's just bad. You know, it was just, I know with all the medications and terrible stomach issues. And I remember saying to the neurologist once, like, if I changed my diet, and he was like, no. Like, he was ready to do brain surgery before diet, which is insane. Like, absolutely insane. On this side, it's like, what?
This side being what? Like,
say to my mother who lost a child from a brain tumor and having to have surgery to remove that brain tumor. And then she didn't wake up from that surgery. And then tell her that this other, like we could put a stent in to see if that would help stop the seizures. Like, let's not. I mean, I remember my mom and I having a conversation a little bit over it, and and it was just like, nope. And I remember at that time, like finding the keto diet and being like, well, the doctor says it's not going to work. So, and again, too tired, too fatigued to like think through any of that. So I eventually had to quit school, which I love kind of just to like go back to all those majors. I just love how like the Lord brought all that full circle. Cause I feel like so much now, the nursing, like I had a true desire and a weird like nerdy side where like I love the science of the body and how, just science in general, especially with like biology and different things in terms of medical systems. So I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then the psychology part of me was like, now what I do is like, I understand the body is so interconnected, mind, body, and soul. So I can't touch somebody's food or their lifestyle or put them on supplements, help them detox without also understanding the psyche of why we are the way we are. There is a lot of emotion tied to that. And then my heart is for kids, which is why I wanted to do early childhood education in general. So I just love that kind of like, there was a reason I was attracted to all of those, even if I didn't follow through with those. Like it still
in the
was part
traditional
of
fashion.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. It was still part of who I am. And so to see that, like, even that wasn't a waste because those classes I took or just the pursuit of that career, like none of that was wasted on this end, But anyway, so ended up getting married really young.
How are you?
I was 19 when we got married. And he was just graduating college. So still on seizure medication, now on birth control. I hadn't been on birth control up until this point. And again, I think some people who are like, oh my word, like now I look back and I'm like, if I would have like seen like, 19 old version of me, I would have been like, don't do it. It's going to make everything worse. Like you're already a hot mess. Like you already can't function.
Like,
absolutely.
It'll just balance your hormones. It'll just help.
Yeah.
Can you sense the sarcasm in my voice?
Well, and it wasn't that. Oh, yeah. For you. Hormones, right? For me, it was like, you're just a hot mess. You don't want to get pregnant right now. Like, just don't have a child. Like you can't get off the couch. How in the heck are you going to like have a pregnancy if you like can't drive a car, And I mean, at one point in high school, like I couldn't even shower really with like the door locked because mom's like, I need to be able to know that like I can get in there if something, if you fall or need help. There'd be times like in high school, I would have to like tell the teacher that like I needed my brother who was also at the high school and like she would have to go call him out of class to like come help me because I was going, something about brothers or just family. In that moment, you're like, I don't want a teacher or a school nurse. Like I want my family, So anyway, super funny story. Going to a Christian college, right? Like PDA is like super, super off limits. It's like, you're not even, So my brother, who was a freshman when I was a senior, is way taller than me. And like, we look alike, but it's a boy and a girl. Like, it's still going to look really different, right? So I was a brand new teacher at school that year. So he like walks up to me one time, like in between classes, and, like gives me a big ol' hug and is like, how are you? Kind of thing. And so anyway, we got in trouble later because like there was that, and a teacher said to another teacher, like, oh my word, like that's, and she's like, oh, that's her brother. It's fine. But it's just, that always cracks me up. So I'm like, nope, just my brother. We're just hanging, hugging,
make it weird, teacher.
Hugging in the hall. It wasn't a big deal. But anyway, so get married on birth control. And we had been married 9 months. And
I didn't realize it was 9 months.
It was 9 months. It was like 9, maybe 10 months. And we find out we're pregnant. Like call the gynecologist. I'm like, so I went off my birth control pack, never started my period. Do I go on another pack? Like, do I just start it again? So I was on birth control. I was on birth control.
You were on your sugar pill week.
My sugar pill week, yeah.
Okay,
for sure.
so you didn't like go off of birth control.
No. Yeah, sorry.
So you were on your sugar pill.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah.
Sugar pill.
Sugar pill for my week.
And then you never started.
I never started. So I was like, it's never happened. Do you start a new pack?
Thank goodness you
Or, I know.
Because like.
It was weird. Like, yeah. I was like, I don't know. So she's like, well, maybe you're pregnant. I was like, no. Like, I'm not pregnant. Like, I'm on seizure medication, so I can't be.
Do you think that canceled it out? Do you think your seizure?
I mean, if it did, someone should have told me that. My goodness, like nobody ever seemed like that was a concern. But I haven't actually studied that, so I have no idea. I don't know. I also had like crazy endometriosis, and later, when after both my kids, I ended up having surgery to remove the endometriosis, and
I did not know that.
And they also found, they're like, oh, you have PCOS too. So like, I don't know. Like, my sister who had severe endometriosis was told she could never have kids, and she did. But like for me, like we just had immediately right off the bat, we're like, well, we're going to prevent it, but like we'll probably adopt because I have all these weird health issues. Of course, I'm not going to get pregnant kind of thing. Like super, So anyway, pregnant, they're like, yeah, go off the pill. Like, don't keep taking it because it clearly didn't work.
Yeah.
So I always tease people. I'm like, there is a 1% on the back of the, this only works 98% of the time. And I'm like, because some of us still get pregnant on it, so I had to go off all medication.
I'm just curious because I would want to know this. I'm not on birth control. You know how that operates. We can get into that some other time. But like, were you consistent with it, or were you like, I'll take it
as far as I know, I was. Again, I have a weird memory lapse,
right?
Where some things are a little fuzzy. I mean, I knew I had to take. Even it was just crazy, right? My seizure medication didn't work, but I was bound to take it because it had to work, right? It's like I know I took that religiously, so I have. I feel like I would have noticed in the pack, like, oh, I missed a couple days, unless I didn't pop them out and didn't take them. I don't know. Anything can happen.
Okay. Yeah, no.
My brain. Curious. Between the fog and the seizures and just the low energy and just survival. And we got married young, which I would not change any of that. But we had no money. We, I feel like there was just so much stress. My husband worked a lot of jobs at that point, and I was babysitting with my mom, which was great just because it gave some extra income. And then if I was really tired, I'd be like, all the kids are napping. I'm going to go nap, Mom. So she'd be like, cool. So at least Mom was still there kind of thing. But anyway, so we get pregnant. I love when people tell me their stories of how they love being pregnant. I'm like, that's amazing. I did not have that experience at all.
Yeah, people need to hear that too, because there are people out there like you who didn't like it and they feel like trash because I did not enjoy
terrible.
This magical experience.
Yeah.
So great.
No, again,
but it was
you add the
you already felt bad, and it just
right.
It just intensified it.
Yeah. Right. And it's going to be hard to ever assess.
Yeah, I know.
Which one. Although you think that
you could try to get,
yeah. It's so, because there's obviously some trauma there that I should probably work through because, right. Because I didn't enjoy it. It was miserable. I mean,
it's the same with my wedding. Like I didn't enjoy the wedding.
Yeah.
It's like you said, to kind of grieve your expectations that you had set up and that were never met and that just still live in your heart of like, this is what I wanted, this is what I didn't get, and that's why I'm so mad.
Yeah.
You just hold it and you carry it around all the time and then that's just your life and you need to come to terms.
Yeah, it's part of healing, right?
Yeah.
That's we heal physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Like you have to heal all of that. It's just part of it. So I have my son, and his
What year was this?
2010. And his story could probably be an own podcast in and of its own. Yeah. And he just, I mean, day one of coming out was just the delivery was terrible. At one point, I really remember like someone just needs to give me a C-section because I can't do this. Like I didn't think I had any more energy to push him out. Like
how long was your labor?
So labor was like 24 hours with him, but then it was again a weird thing where my body wasn't ready, but it was ready. It's really common apparently to have your water break during full moon. Which again, now I love, like, the more I know now about the full moon, I'm like, the full moon, like, no wonder people go nuts around the full moon. But so my water broke, but my body wasn't in labor.
Okay.
But at that point, I was very medically minded. So I had strep B. So I had to, like, okay, well, I have to do antibiotics. So I did like 3 rounds of antibiotics while I was in labor with him.
Oh, why 3 rounds?
Because as long as you're in there, they just kept hooking me back up. And again, I'm 21. I'm sick. I can't think. I don't know. I didn't ask questions.
Well, I'm not judging you because, like,
right. I don't understand.
Like, why did we let that happen? But it's because the doctor told us we had to. We can't tell the doctor no. Yeah, you can't. You can fire that hoe. Like, you don't need him.
Can you tell we're a little cynical about a few things? Like,
well, it's because we have there's real world experience. There's people diagnosing you with cervical cancer and then not being real. Me.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, no.
Yeah.
That's not, you can't just do that and then expect everyone to be like, oh, hell, doctor, whatever you say. I think they have a place. I think an emergency situation, but you're not in charge of my day-to-day health.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Now I can think about a Santa Claus right now.
What?
Oh, you said hoe.
I meant hoe, like H-O-E.
I know, but I just was, and my brain went to Santa. I don't know.
All right, yeah, that's good.
That's cool. So anyway, he's super traumatic. He just, again, he has a whole health story in and of itself. But it was very stressful. You know, him at a young age was crazy stressful. So Alex, fast forward to being 10 months old, and amongst all of his health issues that we had going on, and again, it was one of those where I knew something.
Lessened.
No,
like yours were still there.
Yeah, if anything, it was worse now, and because now there was a stress of this and nursing and pregnancy and all that stuff. And again, I love it. We nursed out of finances.
Yeah.
Because I remember thinking if I could afford formula, I would, because I just didn't have any energy or anything to give.
Yeah.
So fast forward 10 months, it was about 10 or 11 months, and we find out we're pregnant again.
Were you on birth control?
I was on birth control and I was slowly weaning off nursing. So I was on a mini pill.
Yeah.
But get pregnant again. And I honestly was embarrassed to tell people. I felt so guilty, which again, this is a whole emotional trauma in this, but felt super, super guilty and embarrassed. We have no money, we're young. What are we doing? And I'm sick. I can't do anything.
Yeah.
And so anyway, about 12 weeks, we ended up miscarrying. And so then you go through all this trauma of did I do something? I didn't want this baby. Like I was embarrassed. So did I force this to happen? Which I know I didn't, but in that moment, I was tired. I didn't feel good. There was so much stress and trauma. And then my son, who did not seem normal to me, although no one would believe me that everyone's like, no, he's fine. He's just eccentric. He's just sensitive to sounds. He's just whatever. Like, I'm like, this isn't normal. Like, this is not like I've been with kids. I have a nephew who is a little older than him. I'm like, doesn't seem neurologically, like developmentally normal. But again, I had my own stuff. And so then we miscarry. You start to go through the grieving process of that, which is really interesting because I think at that point is when God taught me a lot about grief. And I'm still learning, but growing up with a sister who passed away, I feel like a sister who I never met, that was like, even as a little girl, like learning how to like somewhat grieve someone you've never met, was played in part with me grieving a child I had never met. There's something very physical, at least for me, that when I had my babies, like something, part of me left. Like it was like a weird like energy that like left me. But with Alex, I held it. And so that was part of me that left. He's here, it's okay. But when I miscarried, and it was a really traumatic thing, and it was, I would do it very differently now in terms of like, you know, what I did with the baby and everything else. But at the time I was just like freaked out. Like I didn't know what this was. And I was,
you did the best you could with what you knew.
Yeah. And I was like hemorrhaging super bad to the point where they thought I might need to go to the hospital, which I didn't. It eventually slowed down. But again, that grief, and even like looking back on my health, like grieving losses in my health. Like I don't think anyone had ever walked me through that, and no one spoke of that. What do you do? And I think with miscarriage, I realized how quickly nobody spoke on this idea that we grieve a lot of things. I think we're only taught how to grieve when it is like there's a process of death in which we grieve. You have a funeral and you bury, and that's all part of the process. And then you go through 7 or 9 stages of like grief? 5. Oh, wow. I'm adding a lot more stages.
Yeah. I think it's 5 stages of grief.
Yeah,
but
that would make
that's a book that someone put a title on it.
For sure.
Like, no, you can't put grief in a box. You don't.
No, for sure. But, you know, just the idea that like it was, we grieve, you know, and like, but there's no information on like, first of all, grieving a miscarriage at that point, or at least I wasn't aware of it. I didn't feel directed at. People came out of the woodworks kind of thing to just share their stories with me. But again, there was nobody like holding my hand and walking me through that. And then I think it was also that realization of like, oh, but like there was a whole life I missed out on by being sick. And like nobody walked me through that grief either. And I think that is a very real grief that people don't talk about. You grieve the life you think you were going to have, or the life you thought you should have. You had plans and dreams, and it is the same as losing a person. And miscarriage was the same as losing a person. And that baby will always be my second baby, even though I only, have 2 physical babies. My daughter will always be my 3rd baby, even though people only see her as my second. But anyway, miscarried. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, we find out we're pregnant again. And again, then you go through this whole other thing of like, I don't want this baby. I wanted the other baby. And so much like deep emotion of like feeling so much guilt and shame over all of that. And I'm still really sick. And
really young.
And really young. No, and like by myself, because all my friends are in college, like having a great time. And I'm like, what am I doing? Lord, this is not the life I thought I was supposed to have. And my husband worked weird hours and like wasn't home during normal times, so me by myself a lot of the time. And the enemy is really loud when you're by yourself and you're tired and you don't feel good and you don't know how to combat it. So I feel like there was just a lot there. So we get pregnant again. The doctor's like, well, you need progesterone because you miscarried. So I went through this like crazy long, like getting shots all the time. And it was terrible. So they
didn't just track your progesterone to see like if it was going down. They just decided.
It was like, well, if we don't want you to miscarry again, so here's our best option. So I did it, which just kind of messed me up even more. And then again, the pregnancy, my son is young. The trauma of the miscarriage, I feel like I was just depleted at that point. Really, really sick, constant headaches, everything, you know. So, and then like right, I don't know, it was like January and she was born in March and I got attacked by a dog on a walk. So I ended up having to go on like a long string of antibiotics for a dog bite because they didn't want me or the baby to be infected with anything. And then my seizures started getting really bad again. So they had to induce me with my daughter because they were afraid that the seizures were going to get worse and I was going to get hurt. So anyway, kind of fast forward a little bit through there. Her birth was traumatic, but in a different way. It was easier, much easier. I feel like I always laugh that I should have named her Grace because I feel like she was so much healing and just so much of God's grace because of who she was and who she is. And again, she has a little bit of her own health story, but which now I'm like, man, like there was trauma that she had in the womb and then trauma that with all the crazy antibiotics and stuff that I had during her pregnancy.
Too, like how far along were you? Like were you still taking birth control when you were pregnant?
Oh, for sure.
So because who knows? Like
and I had just turned 21. So I also was like very much like didn't have a whole lot of alcohol before 21. And at 21, I was like, sweet, I'm 21. I'm going to go out and drink. Yeah. And then I found out like I'm pregnant. I was like, oh, shoot. Sorry, buddy. But anyway, so there was some other things in terms of having to move because our landlord sold our place. And so we had to get out, we had to move, and we ended up getting this house. And I think all the stress of all of it had just kind of hit a point where like I'm in the car. My husband had like gotten into CrossFit at that point, which was, I mean, again, like 9-10 years ago. So there wasn't a whole lot of knowledge of CrossFit at that point. But everybody in CrossFit ate paleo. So he's like, we need to eat paleo. And I was like, you cannot add one more stress to my plate right now. This is crazy. So anyway, sitting in the car, pulling out of the driveway at one point, I have an 8-month-old at this point in the back and my son was now 2. And I went into a seizure. And so again, I feel like the Lord just like threw my car into park and we waited till the seizure was over and I got up and went in the house. And at that point I was like, okay, I'm done. Like I'm out of options. I could have just seriously hurt my family. And so I need to do something. And so that was kind of my introduction to, fine, we're going to go paleo. And so taking the dairy and gluten out.
If you write a book, it's going to be called Going Paleo.
Going Paleo.
Because it would be the story of all the build up and it just started with one step and it was going paleo. Like
that was it. I mean, people now ask me like, where do I start? I'm like, just start with your diet. And sometimes that doesn't work for some people. And that's again, a whole other conversation, but
it's bio. Yeah. It's it's an individual person, what worked for them, not just,
paleo didn't work or didn't. Yeah. But for me, like I took dairy out and my allergies went away. My genetic allergies that I got from my grandma and my dad and my asthma, all of it disappeared when I took dairy out. And then taking gluten out, my seizures disappeared. Wait, what? Like I have no more seizures and my skin cleared up and I'm not wheezing and I can mow the grass better than my husband because he's like coughing over there because you're mowing the grass and there's allergies or whatever. And I could sleep with the windows open and it didn't bother me. And occasionally it would, but in general, compared to like... Yeah, I used to swim with an inhaler on each end of the pool because my asthma would be so bad. So I'd have to like swim, pause, puff albuterol, swim, pause, So to go without an inhaler for like 6 months was a big, big deal. And so that was kind of that start of... like, wait a minute, like everything I've been told isn't correct because I was told this wouldn't fix anything. And it is, it's making me better. So let's dive into this. So I started diving into the world of CrossFit and into the world of paleo and learning and all this stuff. And I was like, this is fascinating. So working on my health. And then my son specifically had a lot of issues and it was just building and building and building. And so to be quite honest, I really wanted to take this particular new practitioner's course on ADD, ADHD, autism. And I couldn't take that course unless I had a prerequisite certificate. So that's how I originally found the NTA is because I was like, well, I need some form of nutrition basis certificate in order to go into this. And I was like, I want to help people. Like feeling like my childhood was stripped to a large degree. It's not what I would want for my kids. And then to watch my son walking through the same journey of like, what is life going to look like for you if we don't fix this? And so diet, and I'm like, I want to help kids. Like, I want to give parents another option that this, like, if, like, I always laugh. I'm like, and it's just part of my story, but I think it's okay as long as you don't sit in this moment of like, I think it's okay to like look back and go, what would have been? Like, just as like a fun, like, how awesome of a swimmer would I have been if I have all like the nutrition value and like holistic value and understanding that I have now? Like, I would have been amazing. But that's just, not part of that story. But I just got really passionate about like, I want to help. I want other people to know that there is something more. Like if someone would have told me how much of this would I have not had to go through. And I still battled depression. I still was battling, so many other of my health issues. The funny thing though is I didn't understand enough about gut and other things. So I was eating a lot of paleo food and I started getting crazy amounts of kidney stones to the point where I ended up having to have surgery to get them blasted because they were too big and they wouldn't pass. So that was a whole, fun thing. But just like moving forward in general, just like the more I learned, the better I got. And then started working with a functional medicine doctor several years ago, just like doing therapies and stuff. But again, knowing that like this was me learning, this was me getting my foot in the door so I can learn more about this world because it was so far away from everything I had grown up knowing. I mean, my dad went to the chiropractor for like neck adjustments, but like to be in an office with a chiropractor who like had helped me through several different aspects of like when I had gotten injured in like a car accident or other things. And then be like, wait, this crazy technology, voodoo, whatever, is like, this stuff works. Like, I feel amazing. Like, so just really start diving into that in terms of nutrition and health. And I always tease my husband. I'm like, like whenever he's like, this is weird. What are we doing? I'm like, you're the one who got me into this. Like, if you hadn't pushed paleo, I probably would have never entered this world.
How scary would you, not scary, but like, you ever think of the alternative, like what would you like if you would have never made that switch and stayed the traditional
course for sure.
Like,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know where I'd be. And I think it scared me enough that I wanted something different for my kids.
It's the thing I always say to Emily. It's like, nobody's going to do it for you. You cannot, you can encourage people and tell them to,
for sure.
Like you can, by all means, help them if they ask you questions like how, like where to start and whatnot. But you cannot do it for them, even though you want to. And some people you want to force to get healthy, but can't.
Yeah.
Someone has to hit their breaking point. And everybody has their breaking points, either because you feel so sick that you are fed up and you're going to take authority over yourself, or you're taking the precaution beforehand to make sure that like your life is set up to where you're.
I think there's a fight. There's like a fight and a fire
it is a fight
in some
either
people,
way. Yeah,
for sure. But I feel like there's this fight in some people. You can't put it there.
Yeah,
it's
desperation. It's like, yeah.
And I think it's having someone walk alongside you and say like, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you're not crazy. Like, let me show you on blood work. Let me show you on an oat test. Let me show you on a toxicity test.
An oat.
It's
an oat test. Come on.
An organic acid test. It's a urine type of test. But like, just understanding like, I don't know. I became super, super passionate and excited. And like, there's this, I'm going to butcher the saying, but the saying that's like, it's not work if you love what you do. Like you don't ever really work, kind of thing. And like, there's obviously days none of us want to work, but in general, like I love what I do. I love that I get to help people and I get to hold people's hand. I joke that I have a box of Kleenex close to all of my my in-person consults, because I'm like, you might need this.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't, and we do great. But our story, it is hard. Like we don't get to that point of really, really being, we don't go through life unscathed in general. But I feel like in this particular area, where we have maybe been told to go to a psychiatrist more than once, we have been told there is nothing wrong with us more than once, but we know something is wrong. And so I think that, God gives us this innate wisdom. And when we're told constantly that like that innate wisdom you have there's no validity to that. When you're a mom and you're going, something is wrong with my child. And I think sometimes, like you had said, like we have to be our own advocates at the same time. Like I think walking along a practitioner who is, says like, we're going to trust that innate wisdom to some degree. Like we're going to say, what is your, like, I always tell people like, you're the driver, I'm in the driver's seat, just helping you get where we need to go. Because ultimately it is up to you. And I think that we need to be given back that confidence, and we need to be given back that power. I think that like knowledge should be empowering. So the more we know, the more power we should feel like we have, you know? And so I feel like that's just kind of, with my kids and my family and just kind of leading down this life of healing for me. And then it was like, the Lord was like, okay, like now you get to help other people. So either they don't have to walk that road or they don't have to walk it alone, or you can tell them something better is available. So, yeah.
That was amazing. No, that was amazing. I learned new things about you, friend.
Good. I'm so glad. What a fun podcast, right? To be able to just be like, oh, we're also going to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, to be honest, I think this podcast for me is like, there aren't many women out there, I feel like us. Like we're both in two different
very special.
I think
in a lot of ways.
We are very special. And I know you say it sarcastically.
I do a little bit.
You are very, like, we're very special. I think we think for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're in different stages of like taking control of our life and not just doing what people tell us to do. And like, we're good friends, and I'm excited for where this podcast will go. And we'll talk about everything under the sun, from health to music to therapies to really anything.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about the first episode of Under the Sun being recorded? It's going to be titled Emily.
Yes.
Razzle dazzle. Emily. Yeah.
No, I love it, because I think that one of parts of my healing has just been the Lord being like, are you willing to use your story? All the nitty gritty, ugly, and being careful with what I share for the sake of if other people, I don't want to like create issues with certain people.
Sure.
At the same time, like if it is for His glory, then I have to be willing to share it.
Sure. Well, I think,
and there's this platform at this point.
Yeah.
And I think we've been connected at this point for a reason.
Yeah.
So I can't overthink it.
Well, I think people will hear your story. I mean, the whole, like, basically you just told your life story, and some, like, people will connect with your authenticity, which is something that I love so much about you, is that
Thank you.
Like we get together, we have these talks where there's nothing recording, and we could talk for hours, and you're an authentic person, and I love you so much. I'm excited to start this podcast.
Me too.
I should say start. We have started.
Right.
It's just a matter of,
well, and I think it's just gonna be fun, and I think it's us doing something we love.
Yeah. I'm excited. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it'll impact a lot of people, and probably either start people off on their health journey or give them the encouragement to keep going. Because I think that's hard too. Because if you're just starting and you're overwhelmed with all of the information and food and what to eat, what not to eat, glyphosate, all the things. It can be daunting, but
for sure.
I always say it's the best investment you can do is invest in yourself. Like, because how many times do we thumb over insurance and what's good for us there, and then like we invest in cell phones because we need it, and like we invest in so many silly things that like people put their grocery bill last, or their health, or how they feel last. Sure. They're just like, this is just how life is. So I think what they heard from you will be super encouraging. It's our first episode of Under the Sun, so we really appreciate you listening, watching, being here with us. So we will put our Instagram in the show notes. Feel free to follow us there. We'll probably do little updates just through life, just how things are going. And also you can follow Emily on her personal page at Gracious Healing, and also me at Ilea Colgan. And we will see you next time. Good. Yes! Woo! I want another cup of coffee.
I still gotta drink this. I was talking the whole time.